I'm standing in my $12 million penthouse, looking at my Hermes collection worth more than most people's houses, and my own family has no idea I'm richer than they could ever imagine. Because 3 weeks ago, I decided to test them in the most brutal way possible, and what they did next changed everything. I'm standing in my $12 million penthouse, looking at my Hermes collection worth more than most people's houses, and my own family has no idea I'm richer than they could ever imagine. Because 3 weeks ago, I decided to test them in the most brutal way possible, and what they did next changed everything. My name is Elena, and until recently, I was just another face in my wealthy family's endless social gatherings. You know the type: champagne brunches, charity galas where people donate more for the photo opportunity than the cause, and dinner parties where the conversation revolves around whose yacht is bigger. But here's what none of them knew. While they were all playing with daddy's money or living off trust funds, I had just won the largest lottery jackpot in state history. $53 million. After taxes, I walked away with $34 million, and the only soul who knew was my financial advisor. The irony? My family had always treated me like the poor relation. See, while my cousins Sophia and Marcus inherited their grandmother's real estate empire, and my sister Vivian married into old money, I had chosen to work. Actually work. I ran a small but successful interior design firm, and apparently, that made me the struggling artist of the family. But I was about to find out exactly where I stood with these people. The plan came to me during my cousin Sophia's housewarming party. She was showing off her new $8 million estate in the Hamptons, a gift from her parents for her 28th birthday. As I watched her friends Instagram every corner of the marble-clad mansion, something clicked. "Elena, darling," Sophia had said, draping her manicured hand on my shoulder, "you simply must tell me how you managed to look so put together on your budget." The way she said budget made it sound like a disease. That night, I made a decision that would expose the true nature of every relationship I thought I had. And trust me, what I discovered was worse than I could have ever imagined. I started with a phone call to my sister Vivian. She was at her usual Tuesday spa appointment, the one that costs more than most people's monthly rent. "Viv, I need to talk to you about something serious," I said, injecting genuine panic into my voice. "My business is failing. I'm looking at bankruptcy, and I might lose my apartment." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Oh, that's unfortunate," she finally said, her voice as cold as her monthly Botox injections. "Have you considered downsizing? There are some lovely studio apartments in Queens." "Vivian, I need $15,000 to save everything. Just a loan until I can get back on my feet." "15,000?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "Elena, James and I just put a deposit down on our summer house in the vineyard. Our finances are completely tied up." This was the same James who had bought her a $40,000 necklace the week before, posting it all over social media. "But Viv, you're my sister Dash, and family doesn't put family in impossible positions," she cut me off. "Maybe this is a sign you should pursue something more stable." But that was just the beginning of my family's true colors. Next, I called my cousin Marcus. He answered from what sounded like an expensive restaurant, classical music and clinking crystal in the background. "Marcus, thank God you picked up. I'm in real trouble here." I explained the same fabricated crisis, the imminent bankruptcy, the desperate need for help. Marcus listened with what I thought was sympathy, making all the right concerned noises. "That's horrible, Elena. Truly horrible. You know what? Let's meet for lunch tomorrow. I'll bring my checkbook." Hope bloomed in my chest. Finally, someone who cared. The next day, I waited at the upscale bistro we'd agreed on. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, my phone buzzed with a text. "Sorry, emergency meeting came up." Rain check. That rain check never came. When I called him 3 days later, he let it go to voicemail. The second call went straight to voicemail. By the fourth call, I realized I'd been blocked. But the real betrayal was still coming. My parents were next. I drove to their estate in Westchester, the one where I'd grown up believing family meant unconditional love and support. Mother was in her garden, directing the landscaping crew who were installing a new fountain. A fountain that cost more than the loan I was supposedly desperate for. "Mother, I need to talk to you." She glanced up from her roses, her expression already impatient. "Can it wait, darling? I'm in the middle of dash. I'm losing everything." That got her attention. I spilled the same story, watching her face carefully. She listened with the same expression she wore when the housekeeper reported a broken vase. "Elena, sweetheart," she said finally, "your father and I have always worried about your choices. This little business of yours was bound to fail eventually." "Little business?" The words hit like a slap. "Mother, I need help. I need $20,000 or I lose everything." She sighed, removing her gardening gloves with theatrical precision. "Darling, we simply cannot enable this kind of financial irresponsibility. Perhaps this is exactly the wake-up call you need." "Enable? Mother, I'm your daughter." "Which is exactly why we won't throw good money after bad." She turned back to her roses. "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always have been resourceful." I was beginning to see a pattern, and it was breaking my heart. But I wasn't done. Oh no, I was just getting started. I called my Uncle Richard next, the family patriarch who loved to give speeches about family values at every gathering. "Uncle Richard, it's Elena. I'm calling because I'm in serious financial trouble."
"Ah, Elena."
"How are you, dear?" I launched into my story once again, describing the business failure, the mounting debts, the looming eviction. "Well, that is concerning," he said in the same tone he might use to discuss the weather. "Have you spoken to your parents about this?" They can't help right now." "I see." "Well, Elena, you know I've always believed in the importance of self-reliance. Some of life's greatest lessons come from our lowest moments." "Uncle Richard, I just need a loan. $10,000. I'll pay it back with interest." "Elena, I'm sure you understand that I can't just hand out money every time someone in the family hits a rough patch. It wouldn't be fiscally responsible." This from a man who had just bought a new yacht. I'd seen the photos on my cousin's Instagram, but then something unexpected happened. As I hung up from that devastating call, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my great-aunt Catherine, my grandmother's sister, who lived in a modest apartment downtown. "Elena, honey, I just spoke to your mother." My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. The lecture, the judgment, the final nail in the coffin of my faith in family. "Sweetheart, she told me about your business troubles. Are you okay?" But her voice was warm, concerned.
"Real."
I'm hanging in there, Aunt Catherine. Listen to me, dear. I want to help. Can you come see me tomorrow?" I almost cried right there. "Aunt Catherine, you don't have to dash. Nonsense. Family takes care of family. Come by around 2. I'll make us some tea." What happened next completely changed everything. The next afternoon, I climbed the 3 flights to Aunt Catherine's small apartment. She met me at the door with a fierce hug, and I noticed immediately how frail she felt, how much older she looked since I'd last seen her.
Come in, come in."
"I made your favorite cookies." Her apartment was tiny but immaculate, filled with books and photographs, and the kind of warmth that money can't buy. We sat at her small kitchen table, the same one where she used to help me with homework when I was little. "Now," she said, pouring tea into delicate china cups that had seen better decades, "tell me everything."
So I did.
I told her about the business failing, about the mounting bills, about feeling like I was drowning. And she listened, really listened, in a way none of my immediate family had. "How much do you need, sweetheart?" "Aunt Catherine, I couldn't ask you to dash. How much?" 15,000 would save everything. She nodded thoughtfully, then got up and walked to an old wooden chest in her bedroom. When she returned, she was carrying an envelope. "This is 12,000, she said, placing it in front of me. "It's most of my savings, but I want you to have it." I stared at the envelope, my throat tight with emotion. "Aunt Catherine, this is too much. I can't take your savings." "Elena Rose," she said, using my full name like she had when I was little. "Do you know what your grandmother used to say to me?" I shook my head. She said that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the world falls apart. She reached across and took my hands. "You showed up for me when Harold died. You were there every day for 2 weeks, making sure I ate, helping me with the funeral arrangements, just sitting with me when I cried." I remembered those weeks after her husband's death. It hadn't felt like a choice. It was just what you did for someone you loved. This money, it's just sitting there anyway. But helping you? That gives it purpose. She smiled. "Besides, I have faith in you. You'll get back on your feet, and when you do, you can pay it forward to someone else who needs it." And that's when the guilt hit me like a freight train. Sitting there, looking at this woman who had just given me nearly everything she had, knowing I was worth more than $30 million, I felt sick. But it also crystallized something important. In a family full of millionaires who wouldn't spare me a dime, the one person with almost nothing had given me almost everything. That night, I couldn't sleep.
I kept thinking about the contrast.
Vivian, who spent more on a single handbag than Aunt Catherine had in her entire savings account. Marcus, who dropped thousands on wine at dinner parties. My parents, who were spending more on their bathroom renovation than I had supposedly needed to save my entire business. And then there was Catherine, living on a fixed income, managing her late husband's medical debt, who had just handed over her safety net without hesitation. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called my financial advisor. "Philip, I need you to set up something for me. A trust fund. I wanted to provide my Aunt Catherine with $5,000 a month for the rest of her life, but I want it to look like it's coming from an investment she forgot about." "That's very generous, Elena. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." We spent an hour working out the details. The story would be that her late husband had made a small investment years ago that had grown substantially, and the company was finally distributing the profits. It would be believable, untraceable to me, and would provide her with security without making her feel like a charity case. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because I was about to serve my family the coldest dish of revenge they'd ever tasted. I spent the next week planning. If they wanted to treat me like the poor relation, I'd give them exactly what they expected. But first, I was going to have some fun. I started with subtle changes. I began showing up to family events in obviously expensive outfits, not flashy, but the kind of understated luxury that only comes with serious money. A Chanel suit here, Louboutin shoes there. When anyone asked, I credited a few good investments. The curiosity was killing them. Then came Sophia's birthday party. The whole family was there, gathered in her obscenely expensive backyard, sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people make in a day. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a custom Valentino dress and carrying a Birkin bag that had a waiting list longer than most luxury cars. "Elena," Sophia squealed, air-kissing me. "You look absolutely stunning. That bag, is it real?" I smiled mysteriously. I've been very fortunate lately, but the real show was just beginning. Throughout the evening, I dropped carefully calculated hints. I mentioned my new investment advisor, talked about diversifying my portfolio, and casually referenced some property I'm considering in the Hamptons. I watched their faces. The curiosity, the confusion, the growing suspicion that maybe, just maybe, the family failure wasn't such a failure after all. Vivian cornered me by the champagne fountain. "Elena, what's going on? Last month you were crying about your business failing, and now you're carrying a bag that costs more than my car." "Oh, that." I waved dismissively. I figured some things out. Made some calls. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish when your family teaches you to be resourceful. Her face went white. She remembered using that exact word. But I was just getting warmed up. Marcus appeared at my elbow. Elena, I've been meaning to call you back about lunch dash. Oh, don't worry about it, I said sweetly. I completely understand how busy you must be. Emergency meetings and all. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously. Then my mother approached, her eyes fixed on my jewelry with laser precision. Elena, darling, we need to talk. Your father and I are concerned about where you're getting the money for all this. I looked around at the party, at all these people who had turned their backs on me when I supposedly needed them, who were now circling like vultures because they thought I might have money. Mother, I said, loud enough for the entire group to hear, I appreciate your concern. It's so nice to know family cares about each other's well-being. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. And that's when I decided to drop the first bomb. Actually, since we're all here, I have an announcement to make. The conversations around us gradually quieted. Nothing gets a rich family's attention faster than the word announcement. As you all know, a few weeks ago I was going through some financial difficulties. Nervous glances were exchanged. I reached out to many of you for help, for loans, for support.
I paused, letting that sink in.
And I learned some very valuable lessons about the true nature of family. Sophia's face was turning red. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the perfectly manicured hedge behind him. But I'm happy to report that those difficult times taught me who I can really count on. And I'm pleased to say I've not only recovered, but I'm doing better than ever.
How?
Vivian demanded. How did you turn things around so quickly? I smiled. Well, it's funny you ask. Because the truth is, I let the suspense build, watching their faces. The truth is, I never needed your money at all. The silence was deafening. You see, I was testing you. All of you. I wanted to see who in this family would be there for me when I had nothing to offer in return. Marcus dropped his champagne flute. The crystal shattered on the stone patio, but no one looked away from me. And the results were illuminating. I turned to Vivian. My own sister told me to move to Queens and find something more stable. Then to Marcus. My cousin made promises he never intended to keep, and then blocked my number. To my parents. My mother and father decided not to enable my financial irresponsibility. The circle around me was growing. Other guests were pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. But here's what's really interesting. I continued. While all of you, millionaires, everyone, couldn't spare a few $1,000s for family, one person gave me nearly everything she had. Someone who's struggling to pay for her medication gave me most of her life savings without a second thought. And then I dropped the nuclear bomb. So, I've made some decisions about how to use my resources going forward. You see, 3 weeks before I called any of you, I won the lottery. $53 million. The gasps were audible. Someone's wine glass hit the ground. $34 million after taxes. And every single one of you failed the test. Vivian grabbed my arm. Elena, if this is true, we need to talk. Family should stick together dash. I pulled my arm free. Family should stick together? Where was that philosophy 3 weeks ago? We didn't know. Sophia protested. If we had known you had one dash, if you had known I was rich, you would have helped me? I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. That's exactly my point. But I wasn't finished destroying them yet. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. Aunt Catherine, who gave me $12,000 she couldn't afford to lose, will be very surprised to learn about a forgotten investment that's going to pay her $5,000 a month for life. I turned to face each of them in turn. As for the rest of you, well, you've shown me exactly where I stand. Consider this my resignation from this family. Elena, you're being ridiculous, my father said, finding his voice at last. You can't just dash, actually, I can. See, that's the beauty of having real fuck you money. The profanity sent shockwaves through the crowd. I don't need any of you. For anything. Ever again. I started walking toward the exit, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Sophia? Congratulations on the house. I'm sure the $8 million your parents spent on it will bring you lots of happiness. Almost as much as the $12,000 Aunt Catherine spent on someone she loves. And then I walked away from all of them forever. Well, almost forever. 6 months later, I was reading Forbes over coffee in my new penthouse when an interesting article caught my eye. Marcus's tech startup had failed spectacularly, leaving him nearly bankrupt. Apparently, his emergency meeting that had prevented him from helping me was actually a desperate attempt to save his failing company. I thought about that for exactly 30 seconds. Then I turned the page. 2 months after that, Vivian called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Elena, I know we haven't talked, but James and I are getting divorced. He's trying to take everything, and I need a good lawyer. I was hoping you might know someone who could help, or maybe loan me dash. I hung up. My parents tried a different approach. They showed up at my office unannounced, looking appropriately humbled and contrite. Elena, sweetheart, we've had time to think about what happened, my mother began. We realized we made some mistakes dash. Some mistakes? I didn't look up from my computer. You abandoned your daughter when she needed you most. That's not a mistake, Mother. That's a choice. We want to make it right, my father said. We want to be a family again. Now I did look up. A family? We were never a family. We were just people who shared DNA and holiday dinners. Real families show up for each other. But the most satisfying moment came a year later. I was having lunch with Aunt Catherine at her favorite restaurant, a cozy little place she could now afford thanks to her mysterious inheritance. She looked healthier than I'd seen her in years, stress-free and genuinely happy. You know, she said, cutting into her salmon, I ran into your cousin Marcus at the grocery store yesterday.
Oh, he asked about you.
Wanted to know if I had your new number.
She paused.
I told him I didn't think you'd want to hear from him. What did he say? He said he'd made a mistake. That he wished he could take back how he treated you when you were in trouble. She looked at me curiously. He seemed to think you might forgive him if he apologized. I considered this while sipping my wine. Marcus, who had blocked my number rather than face an uncomfortable conversation, now wanted forgiveness. What do you think, Aunt Catherine? Should I give him a chance? She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Elena, honey, I've learned something in my 78 years. People who show you who they are in a crisis believe them. They might regret their choices later, but when the chips are down again, they'll make the same ones. She was right, of course. That afternoon, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. I blocked every member of my immediate family on every platform. No social media, no phone calls, no accidental encounters at charity events. I disappeared from their world as completely as they had disappeared from mine when I needed them. But here's the thing about real revenge. It's not about making them suffer. It's about building a life so good, so fulfilling, so genuinely happy that their absence becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly what I did. 3 years later, my life was unrecognizable. I'd started a foundation that helped elderly people in financial crisis, inspired, of course, by Aunt Catherine's example of generosity in the face of hardship. We'd helped over 500 seniors avoid eviction, bankruptcy, and worse. I'd also started dating someone incredible. David was a doctor who ran free clinics in underserved communities. He had no idea about my lottery winnings. He thought I'd made my money in investments and business ventures. And he loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. Most importantly, I'd learned the difference between family and relatives. Relatives are people you share genetics with. Family are people who show up. Aunt Catherine and I had dinner every Sunday. David and I had been together for over a year. My foundation team had become like siblings. I had a chosen family that was worth more than all my biological relatives combined. And then came the ultimate test of my new philosophy. Last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elena? It's Uncle Richard. I nearly hung up immediately, but something in his voice stopped me. Elena, I'm calling because I'm dying. The words hit like a physical blow. Whatever else he was, Richard had been a significant presence in my childhood. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months. Pancreatic cancer. And before I go, I need to make some things right. I listened in silence. What I did to you, what we all did, it was unconscionable. You were family, and we failed you when you needed us most. I've regretted it every day since. Uncle Richard dash. Please let me finish. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know we forfeited any right to ask anything of you. But I'm hoping you might let me see you. Just once. To apologize properly. And here's what I learned about forgiveness. 2 weeks later, I sat in a hospital room, looking at a man who had once seemed so powerful and imposing, now frail and connected to machines that beeped softly in the quiet room. You came, he whispered, and there were tears in his eyes. I came. Elena, I've had a lot of time to think about what kind of man I've been, what kind of family we've been, and I'm ashamed. I sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching this man who had dismissed my crisis, so callously now facing his own mortality. When you called me that day, you weren't asking for charity. You were asking family to act like family. And I failed you. He struggled to sit up straighter. We all failed you. Uncle Richard, I want you to know something. After that birthday party, after you told us all what you'd done, it changed me. I started thinking about what really matters, about what I'd want people to remember about me. He gestured weakly toward the window. I've spent the last 2 years trying to be better. I've been volunteering at a homeless shelter. I set up college funds for my grandchildren, but also for 10 kids in the neighborhood who couldn't afford school. I've been trying to live like the man I should have been when you needed me. But the biggest surprise was still coming. There's something else, he said. I rewrote my will. I'm leaving half of everything to various charities. But there's a specific bequest I want to tell you about. I waited. I'm leaving $2 million to your foundation, the one that helps elderly people in crisis. He smiled weakly. I figured you'd know better than anyone how to use it to help people who really need it. I was speechless. I don't expect forgiveness, Elena. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you taught me something important about what family really means. And I'm sorry it took me so long to learn it. I stayed with him for 2 hours. We talked about my childhood, about his regrets, about the foundation, and the work we were doing. He asked about Aunt Catherine, and I told him how well she was doing, how happy she was. She was always the best of us, he said softly. Even when we were kids, Catherine was the one who'd give you her last cookie if you were hungry. When it was time to leave, he took my hand with what little strength he had. Elena, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider speaking at my funeral? Not about me as I was, but about the importance of treating family like family. I looked at this man who had once dismissed my crisis so coldly, now vulnerable and genuinely remorseful. I'll think about it, I said. He died 6 weeks later. I did speak at his funeral. Not about forgiveness, that was too simple, but about the difference between regret and redemption, and how it's never too late to become the person you should have been all along. The entire family was there, of course. I saw Vivian, divorced and struggling. Marcus, who'd lost his house and was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. My parents, who looked older and sadder than I remembered. None of them approached me afterward. I think they understood that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But that's not the end of my story. Last week, I got a call that changed everything. Again. Miss Elena? This is Dr. Morrison from Mercy General. I'm calling about Catherine Weber. She's listed you as her emergency contact. My blood went cold. What happened? She had a mild stroke. She's stable now, but she's been asking for you. I was at the hospital in 20 minutes. Aunt Catherine looked so small in that hospital bed, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. There's my girl, she whispered, her speech slightly slurred but clear. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, but the doctor says I'll be fine. Might need some help for a while, though. I took her hand. Whatever you need. Physical therapy, home care, anything. Actually, she said with a mischievous smile that reminded me why I loved her so much, I was hoping you might help me with something else. Anything. I want to leave everything to your foundation when I go. It's not much, but with that monthly stipend I've been getting, I've been able to save quite a bit. She squeezed my hand. I wanted to help other people the way you've helped me. And that's when I realized something beautiful. The money I'd won in the lottery had given me financial freedom, yes. But the real treasure had been discovering who deserved a place in my life and who didn't. Aunt Catherine had started with almost nothing and ended up being the richest person I knew, rich in kindness, generosity, and love. My biological family had started with everything and revealed themselves to be spiritually bankrupt. The revenge I'd planned had turned into something much more powerful, the creation of a life worth living, surrounded by people worth loving. 6 months later, I made one final decision. Aunt Catherine had recovered beautifully from her stroke and was living in a gorgeous assisted living community that felt more like a luxury resort than a care facility. David and I were engaged, planning a small wedding where the guest list would be full of chosen family rather than biological obligation. But there was one more thing I needed to do. I wrote a letter to each member of my biological family. Not to reconcile, some betrayals are too fundamental for that, but to give them one last gift. The truth about what they had cost themselves. Dear Vivian, I wrote, you once told me to be more resourceful when I was supposedly in crisis. I want you to know that I took your advice to heart. I became so resourceful that I no longer need anything from anyone who wouldn't give it freely. You taught me that love with conditions isn't love at all. Thank you for that lesson. It saved me from wasting any more time on people who see relationships as transactions. I hope you find someone who loves you the way you should have loved me, unconditionally. Your sister, Elena. I sent similar letters to Marcus, my parents, and Sophia. Not cruel letters, but honest ones. Letters that released me from any remaining obligation to people who had never truly been family. And then I did something that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. I legally changed my last name to Catherine's maiden name, Weber. Elena Weber had a nice ring to it. Because sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Sometimes you have to build your own. 3 years after walking away from that birthday party, I was worth more than money could measure. I had love, purpose, genuine relationships, and the peace that comes from knowing exactly where you stand with everyone in your life. The lottery had given me millions of dollars. But the real jackpot was learning that the people who matter will show up for you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. And those are the only people worth keeping. In the final scene, Elena reveals that she's been secretly helping her biological family members anonymously through their various crises, not out of love, but as a final lesson. Each envelope of help comes with a note, from someone who understands what family really means. They never learn it's her, but she gets the satisfaction of being the person they couldn't be for her.